today I have a couple of quick tips for you for cutting out small areas of fabric for a project such as when you're doing fusible machine applique. So this is the word "the," which I don't know if you can see that because it's reversed, because you know when you do fusible machine applique, everything is always reversed. So T-H-E. And I need to cut out these little centers of the letters. So the first thing I recommend is cut out the little centers first. Don't cut out all the edges. Don't cut out all the edges of the words and then try to do the centers, because then what happens is it ends up like being really floppy and kind of falling all over the place. And it's easier if you've got this larger piece to work with when you're cutting out your centers. So what I do is I fold it in half and I take a smaller pair of scissors and I make a little hole in the center. And you have to be careful. You can say I almost went over my line there. And then what I can do is just really quickly and easily cut out the center. Now another tip whenever you're using scissors, try to concentrate your cutting in the center of the blade. Don't go all the way to the tip when you're cutting. So for example, if I was cutting here, I wouldn't cut like that. Because what happens is if you use the tip, if you go all the way to the tip of your scissor when you're cutting, I don't know if you can see it, but it made this teeny tiny tear. So if you keep your fabric always more in the center of the blade and don't cut all the way, don't snip all the way to the very end, you get a nicer, cleaner cut. So back to my center. I'm going to keep cutting, and then when I get to a corner, when I can, I like to cut with the center of my blade. So I'm going to cut from this cut, and then I'm just going to pivot my fabric. Sometimes it's really hard to do that, and you'll have to cut both ways, like into the corner, but I try to cut away from the corner if I can. So, and you can see where my scissors are staying pretty still, and I'm actually turning the piece of fabric. So I've got that one done. I can flip it over. That looks pretty good. So now I can do the next one. So I'm going to fold it in half, make a little slit. Really, you just need enough to be able to get your scissor blade in there. And I'm going to cut. Now again, I'm going to pivot here at this corner. If you want to, you can cut into the corner if you need to. I just think it's a little bit more difficult to do that way. The other thing is if you're cutting into a corner, you can see that left like a little bit of fuzz. Sometimes what you need to do is, again, with the center of your blade, kind of just take the tiniest snip. You don't want to pull that fuzz too much, because what happens is if it's a thread, it can pull the thread from the rest of the fabric, and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to keep going, and then again, this is a corner, so I'm going to try to cut away from the corner if I can. And so there we've cut out our two centers. And I'm going to go back. Once I flip it over, I can see where that's not quite straight. So I can go in with my scissors and just kind of clean that up a little bit. So that was much easier. Then I'm going to do this section and show you why you want to cut the little center holes first. So let's just say that I had cut this outside edge first. And again, even with the big scissors, you can see I'm staying in the center of the blade. I never cut all the way to the tip. And I'm also kind of moving the fabric and the paper even more than I'm moving the scissors. Okay, so I've got that cut. Now let's say I had cut this whole thing out and then I go back to do these holes. See how this is like really floppy because it doesn't have the extra fabric around it to support it? So I still can cut this center section, but it's a lot harder to do because this is flopping around on me. You also have more of a chance of this part maybe getting stuck in your scissors underneath, and then you end up clipping off something that you didn't want to clip. So that's something else you need to do when you're cutting out something like this, these letters that tend to flop around. So, I mean, I can do it. I can cut my center, but I don't know if you can see how much harder this is for me to hold and manage with just these little skinny pieces of fabric there to hold it in place. So those are just a couple of tips for cutting out small areas and skinny areas, such as lettering, when you're cutting out something for machine applique.